Success.com. I'm excited, beyond excited, for the person I'm interviewing today, Matthew Abrams. Matthew goes a long way in his work through a community, a process, a framework we highly recommend called EOS. It's based on a book that was introduced to me about a decade ago called Traction by Gino Wickman. What he does goes well into that and beyond that with his unique work. He's done quite a few unique things over the years. I'm going to tap into his bio here so I can fully kind of recognize him. He's a leadership expert in conflict, team dynamics, and organizational performance. More than 15 years of experience working with visionary entrepreneurs and leadership teams. He's helped organizations transform conflict into clarity, creativity, and results, which is what we live for in our community success circles. His frameworks enable leaders to harness friction as a catalyst for growth, trust, and innovation. Matthew has coached and advised leaders from over 200 companies, I believe about 15 right now, who's actively working with, engaging with each month as part of EOS as an implementer. And he helps teams build cultures rooted in authenticity, accountability, and high performance. We love the word accountability. We embrace that in our community success circles as a means to encourage our members to make 1% progress each day while also having more and more play in their lives, like really bringing more joy in our lives. One of the great things about EOS and the framework is it also encourages members to take time off. It's something we encourage our clients to do, to play, to disengage with their business so the business might scale or will likely scale. So if you've listened to some of our recent podcasts, that's often been a theme for our recent podcasts. Well, Matthew, it's great to have you today. And so I'm excited about what you're doing in your upcoming book. We'll talk about your journey, your evolution, what brought you to EOS, how did you get involved with organizations, and of course, the specific topic of like conflict resolution in companies. Talk to
Yeah,
me.
awesome. Thanks, Joseph. I'm so excited to be here. So my journey to this point really began with the first company that I founded. It started off great. We had 2 or 3 years of growth and real alignment. And then the fun and play started seeping out of it. And really, we had me and my co-founder and our vision started to diverge. And that happens sometimes, and oftentimes that can be really effective and evolve the vision. But for us, it wasn't effective for one primary reason.
Mm,
We couldn't have hard conversations. We could
mm,
not do that effectively. So what happened was I would shut down, I would get frustrated. Over time, I actually became physically ill
mm,
from running that business. And then we were like at this inflection point. Should we try to keep going? Can we work it out? Or should we close the business? Or is there some other option? And we were working with a moderator, like a mediator, who was kind of coaching us through this decision. And the moderator asked me, how did you learn conflict? And I thought that was a peculiar question because none of
mm,
us really like learn conflict in school or like, what does that even mean? And then she asked, how did your parents model conflict for you?
mm, mm.
And
Wow.
what I realized was that my parents were incredibly happy for about the first 15 years of my life, and I never saw conflict. Doesn't mean they didn't have conflict, I just never saw it. And then they got in a really, really big fight, which we never talked
Mm,
about or processed. But over the next 10 years, their marriage slowly but consistently dissolved. And I never saw conflict after that.
wow.
I learned a really valuable lesson in that moment, not in the moment of that conflict and the lack of observing my parents having conflict, but in that moment in the mediator's office, because I created this story that having conflict translates to losing the most important things in your life,
Mm, wow.
which isn't a rational story, but a lot of our beliefs and identity is not conscious, it's subconscious. So that was the story, and then I realized that in this business, that's what I was doing, avoiding conflict. So that was chapter 1. Chapter 2 was the business failed, so we
Yeah.
closed the business,
But,
and then
but,
I went.
but by the way,
Yeah.
before we jump to that's profound what you said, and I'm inspired like how you brought something up from your childhood, and like often most entrepreneurs, many entrepreneurs members of our community, they have a way of relating to people based on things they've experienced growing up. Whether there's conflict for me, I was bullied, and I at some point wanted to be heard, right? So started building frameworks where I could, learn how to be heard more often. It's fascinating how that relates to the work you're doing, and also having you see where you're avoiding conflict and how vital it is to navigate through conflict, especially as it relates to building a business, scaling a business with two co-founders. Back to
Yeah.
you.
Okay, so I have to do a little sidebar, and then I will get back to the story. What you're bringing up is so profound and so significant because so many leaders, CEOs that I work with and founders that I work with have accomplished amazing things.
Mm.
But oftentimes there's this wound, this trauma, whether it's being bullied and having a need to be heard, or it's being bullied and having a need to be liked,
Mm.
or something. We
Mm.
all have gone through this. And what I notice is it's a phenomenon that is unique in a lot of ways to entrepreneurs because we create this protection and achievement to compensate for the wounds of our childhood.
Yes.
And Jerry Colonna, who wrote this book called Reboot, he's
Mm.
also called the CEO Whisperer. He
Mm.
talks about this phenomenon as early promotion. When
Yeah.
we have adversity in our life at a young age, we're promoted early into being a leader in our family because we need to protect, we need to,
Yes.
transcend that situation. So
Brilliantly said. Yeah.
that's
I
such an important thing to realize is that so many of us leaders and entrepreneurs, we do have something from our past and either we reconcile with it and transcend it or it's still guiding us today. So we'll get
yeah.
into that more later, but
Yes.
I
We
love what
will.
you brought up there. So the
Chapter
next
2.
the next chapter was I went on to lead retreats for EO and YPO forums. So, if your listeners aren't aware, EO and YPO are global networks of entrepreneurs that support each other peer to peer to kind of holistically. So,
Mm.
business wise, for sure, family, spirituality, self development, and so I would design and facilitate these retreats once a year for them.
Mm.
And we would go really deep, really vulnerable, really intimate. And what
Yeah.
I realized is that so I led 125 of these retreats over
Wow. Wow.
7 years.
Mm.
And it was such a gift to be present with the realness and with the rawness of these leaders and entrepreneurs. And what became really clear is there was a lot that they were hiding. Not because they were necessarily consciously hiding it from others, but as entrepreneurs and as leaders in our culture and in other cultures,
Yeah.
there's this identity that goes along with being what a leader means, and it's having it figured out, having the answers, not being emotional about things,
Yeah.
saying I
Yeah.
need help, and it creates this wall
Mm.
and minimizes connection. And once we start to create the conditions for authenticity, for people to
Yes.
be
Yeah.
real, it inspires that in others. It transcends and helps them elevate their identities and go on to accomplish bigger and better things and things that require much less friction and are much more aligned with who they
Yes.
authentically are. So those were the lessons that I
Yes.
was starting to learn.
Especially, I imagine, when they can identify the strengths, communicate those strengths, right? Work on their strengths, right? And acknowledge each other for what we're not strong at. We're all uniquely wired in some unique ways. One of my mentors in the process of building success circles many years ago was Keith Ferrazzi, and he often talks about that too in settings, and it's encouraging authenticity, people to open up and noticing what happens, especially sharing as an opportunity to move the needle forward, move things forward, versus like having some providing the other person evidence that you can't perform. So many of us are brought up parenting to show up in a way where we might hide those weaknesses when, in fact, those weaknesses are a strength when we're willing to expose them, or share them, with our clients and be authentic because they realize that we're vulnerable and we're real, and they might have the same issues as us too. So good stuff.
Exactly. The number one most powerful thing that I see time and time again with great leaders is they are willing to be seen. When
Hmm.
they are willing to be seen for their gifts, when they're willing to be seen for their weaknesses, where they're a work in progress, one,
Hmm.
that's liberating for
Yeah.
them. And two, it creates implicit permission for everyone on their team and subsequently the rest of the company to show up authentically. And we
Yes.
are all a work in progress. We are not all, any of us are amazing at everything. So it's that permission to really step into what it is we are amazing at and acknowledge the areas that we need support.
So what's the first step a founder can take, like right now, to identify the conversation they're avoiding?
Yeah, so it's such a great question. So the first area is for reflection and understanding what in our life are we tolerating. So
Hmm.
we can apply this framework within a company, but it really transfers to any relationship. So ask, what in my life am I tolerating?
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
getting clear on that and
Hmm.
understanding the story behind that. Why am I tolerating that? And being curious. And this requires us to think about our thinking,
Yeah.
which is not an easy thing. We really need to create space between what we're doing and thinking about why are we doing that. So where are we tolerating things? Why, what is the story we're telling us as to why we're tolerating these things? And then tie that to a belief.
Yeah.
So, for example, you talked about you were bullied as a kid and
Hmm.
you had a need to be heard. So you might not be consciously aware that that's a major motivator for you.
Yeah.
You're in a meeting, you're with a bunch of other folks, you're talking about whatever, you are saying something, but you're not really feeling like it's being heard. You get really frustrated. Obviously, I'm making this up.
Yeah. No, no,
You
no,
get really frustrated.
it's there. It's also there for our children too. So we have a 7-year-old and almost 11-year-old. I can see that in their behavior too at times.
Yeah,
Children want to be heard, and whether we're 5, 7, 11, or if we're 50, like where I am now,
totally.
oftentimes that child still runs the show, and it's acknowledging that internally and noticing that allows us to make a choice in the moment, like literally truly listen. And the value is in truly listening in the moment and getting out of that, like inner self or ego, however people frame it.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, so in this case, there might be some compensation that's happening. You're not showing up really authentically, you're compensating for a historical narrative that's a very
Yeah.
real part of your life. So there might be things that you're tolerating or that are bringing friction into your
Mm.
life. So taking a pause, stepping back, here's a conflict that I have, either a conflict within myself or a conflict between me and someone else. What is the story I'm telling myself? This person doesn't respect me. They're not letting me talk, whatever it is. And then taking a step back, what is the belief that I have? The belief that I have is other people need to listen to me, and being listened
Mm.
to is assurance that I'm worthwhile, that I'm worthy. And then you think about that belief. Is that true?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that true? Well, no, I not everybody's gonna listen to me. Not everybody's gonna agree with me, and that's actually okay.
Yeah.
I know I'm inherently worthy. So then we can flip the script, and then what happens is pretty amazing, right? Once we shift from I am worthy when people are listening to me and valuing my input to I am worthy, my value is gonna resonate with some people, and it's not gonna resonate with some
Right.
people, and that's okay. Wow, we just shifted from an extrinsically dependent place, I
Yeah.
need you to respond in a certain way for me to feel grounded and worthwhile, to freedom. I know I am worthy, and that may resonate with you, it may not. So that's the first thing, is really where am I experiencing tension? And especially if that tension is a pattern, am I experiencing that in multiple relationships of my life? Because if so, the common denominator is probably us. It's probably the story we're telling ourselves. It's probably connected to a belief that we have that we're not conscious of.
Yep.
Getting conscious of that and then repatterning that belief is how we elevate.
I love how you're embracing personal development, leadership principles into all of this too. I mean, Stephen Covey talks about some of this in Seven Habits. Byron Katie talks about some of these ideas in the book called The Work,
Love her.
and it's very useful to do that deep work because that often shows up in our community success circles. We connect people together who might have differing beliefs, mindsets. Somebody might be extrinsically motivated, someone might be intrinsically motivated, and
Yeah.
it's in connecting those people together on a huddle for like 2 weeks that they have these daily calls. But
Mhm.
they notice things come up, and then after the 2 weeks end, they get paired up with somebody else who might have different strengths. And we do our best to kind of pair people up together who are at a certain income level, so we know like they have a very similar game, perhaps, maybe similar intentions and similar other strengths in life. But we've noticed that in connecting people who are differing, things come up, and then they have a chance to connect with other members of our community. And if these patterns keep coming up in these conversations, these daily 20-minute huddles, then they know that there might be something to work on. And then
Yeah.
there's something else we play on as we rise to the quality of expectations of our peer group. So it's like setting the bar, being authentic, being open, setting expectations, and rising to those expectations. So I hear a lot about what you're saying. Um, Executions are really a key part of our community. Really, really important. We want people to not get stuck kind of thinking about these things too much. It's very valuable, and I've certainly gone through my share of programs, therapy, and more over the years. How does a team clear the air and turn this into aligned action? Like, what's the bridge between a hard conversation and measurable execution?
Yeah, so there's really 2 things that I coach my clients on when they're having so there's 3 things to think about: in advance of a hard conversation, during a hard conversation, and after a hard
Hmm.
conversation. So let's talk about during a hard conversation. So there are really, if your listeners can walk away with 2 things that will make a 90% improvement on the productivity of the conflict they have. One is a concept that I talk about in Inviting Genius called Ma. It's a Japanese
Hmm.
concept,
Hmm.
and it's really just about it translates to a sacred pause.
Hmm.
Slowing things down amid conflict, because what's happening in our brain when we're in conflict is our amygdala, the fight or
Yeah.
flight, freeze or follow component of our brain, is just trying to keep us safe. That's it. Our neocortex, our thinking brain, is not online. So when we slow things down, we take even just one breath. Sometimes we need to take a time out.
Hmm.
Whatever we need to do to slow things down, we're
Yeah.
gonna get the neocortex back online,
Yeah.
dramatically increasing the chances of having a productive conflict. So that's great for anyone in the conflict, but even with the teams that I work with, I coach them on noticing when this is happening and saying, "Okay, whoa, 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 let's just take a breath. Let's slow this down." So that's one. And two is, you were talking about the value of relationships. Relationships is where the magic happens.
Hmm.
Relationships is where we get out of the world that I know and I
Hmm.
often feel confident that I believe is the reality, but it's
Yeah.
not. Oftentimes, especially in conflict, we're motivated by our biases,
Yes.
specifically confirmation bias.
Yes.
I I believe what I already think that I believe, I'm
Hmm.
biased to that, and desirability bias, which is I'm biased to what I want to be
Yeah.
true.
Yes.
So rarely do we see the whole reality. So in relationship, this is the second principle, which
Hmm.
is what I call exploring the edges.
Hmm. Hmm.
So your reality is real, and I need to honor and value and respect that. My reality is real. That needs to be honored, valued, and respected. Neither your nor my reality is probably the capital T, capital R reality. So what we need to do is explore the edges together with
Yes.
curiosity,
Yeah.
and saying things like, I really want to understand dot dot dot. help
Mhm.
me see what you're seeing here. I'm sensing whenever I'm talking about this, you get really emotional, and I'm not understanding what is provoking that, and I really would like to.
Mm.
So inviting that curiosity so together we can explore these edges because conflict
Yeah.
is only a s- it's only um,
Yeah.
just letting us know that something is out of alignment. So
And
when we
I appreciate how you bring up
yeah, go ahead.
curiosity and awe or moments of those edges, right? Understanding that because it's in the curiosity that I find people often react, right? And when they react,
Yeah.
their body language, how they subcommunicate, oftentimes creates like separation, like creates boundaries already. And by embracing curiosity for that person and finding the edges and kind of the rules that we both operate in, allows a bit of compassion. And you mentioned before the pause, the ma. It allows maybe taking that extra breath is very useful because now we can begin to understand, maybe even go deeper into the person's why, on why they believe that way. Not necessarily to change our own beliefs, but maybe to be open to why they believe what they do in creating further alignment. Would you say that's kind of accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're just really trying to understand in conflict it's almost always because someone has an unmet need.
Yeah.
And these are foundational human needs, a need to be
Mm.
respected, a need to be safe, whatever it is. So we need to be curious longer to understand what is that other person's need that's not being met? What is the need that I have that's not being met? Because when we create these stories, we're not oftentimes vulnerable and introspective.
Yeah.
We are seeing it, I have it all figured out. So when we can be curious about ourselves, curious about the other, understand what that need is, and then work together in
Yeah.
relationship to meet those unmet needs, that's where the relationship transcends. That's
Yes.
where innovation and evolution happens. And actually, the thing that we're most afraid of, which is harming the relationships that matter, the exact opposite happens.
Yes.
Those relationships become closer, tighter,
Yeah.
deeper when we can do conflict productively.
Incredible. Incredible. We just talked about conflict to execution, kind of talked about that. And so let's talk about momentum. So, what rhythm or system, like what systems or what are some things people can do to, from having like one good conversation
Mhm.
versus falling back on old patterns? What can they do on a repeated basis to kind of keep that flow going so that
Mhm.
they're actively making choices together, working together? Because people, we're human. We fall back oftentimes, even when we have this awareness, we fall back to how we used to be. It's just human behavior, especially.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so in the book, I teach a methodology for how to do this productively. So sometimes we're in conflict, we don't know that we're about to be in conflict, it just happens, right?
Mm.
Sometimes we know we're gonna have a hard conversation with someone. So I'll give you a very simplified version that I go into more detail in the
Mm.
book. The first step, it's called the PEACE process,
Mm. Mm.
PACE. The
Mm.
first step is pursue alignment. So
Absolutely.
instead of me and you having an issue going head to head, we need to figure out what is our shared objective?
Mm.
How is it me and you versus the issue so we can be partners? So that's step 1, always starting with that aligning so we're actually facing shoulder to shoulder, facing the same direction. The E, this is all modeled off
Mm.
nonviolent communication and
Mm.
Mark
Love it.
Rosenberg's work. It's just an evolution of that. So the E is extract the facts. What
Mm.
actually happened? There's no analysis, no judgment. You said this, you left the meeting early, dropped you know, threw your book on the ground, whatever it is, but actual facts that happened.
Yes.
So that's the E, extracting the facts.
Yes.
A is address the story and emotion. And this is my story, my emotions. So when showed up to the meeting late twice in a row, 2 meetings in a row, the story that came up for me is you don't value these meetings. And these meetings are really important to me. And that brings up disrespect. I feel disrespected. That's the emotion. So the story and emotion go together.
Yeah.
So then we go to the C, which is what we were just talking about, compassionately sparring.
Mm,
Not giving up
mm.
my agency and my story and feelings and emotions, holding that, but also being curious,
Yes.
being compassionate. So
Yes.
balancing the task and the relationship at once. And the goal in this step is understanding the needs. What is
Yeah.
the need? So I have a need to be respected.
Mm,
So
mm.
then the last is express make a request. Express a request that would meet that need, and that could just be like, "Hey, can you commit to being on time for these meetings, or at very least, text me if you're
Mm,
gonna be late
mm.
and let me know why." But the real need would be met if you're prioritizing and consistently showing up to these meetings on time. Would you be willing to commit to that? And then they most of the time will say yes. And if you get
Yes.
that commitment to meet that future need, you have resolved the root of the issue. So that's a methodology. Obviously, you don't always need such like a comprehensive step-by-step
No,
process, but you practice that, it becomes more internalized.
absolutely.
But really just fundamental principles, first
Yes.
principles, take responsibility for your own experience.
Yes.
This
Yes.
happened. This is my story. These are my emotions. This is the need that I have. Can we figure out a way? And I know you have your own story, so being curious in that process too. So we can figure this out together, not as
Yeah.
adversaries.
I love that. You touched on quite a bit there, not just, I mean, with all of that. And I think at the core is taking responsibility for what the story we're saying, each of us is saying. So it's really vital. My wife and I, soon after we got married, one of the best things we did, at least my experience of it, was we took a course in nonviolent communication
Yeah.
here in New York, and it served us very well over the past 13 years. Our children have rarely ever heard us raise our voice, and it's just compassionately communicating, hearing the other person, hearing their strength, maybe their love language, what they need in the moment, and it served us quite well. So I love your framework for that, how you kind of optimized it, improved it for the sake of businesses and organizations and founders and co-founders kind of cooperating together, or even employees, or like a founder with an employee, like or a team member. It's very vital to have continuous flow throughout, because when those things are not managed, then those those things can kind of become something bigger. It's kind of like the idea of you push something under a rug, and
Yes.
eventually if you got a lumpy rug that everyone trips over, versus actually just dealing with it, recognizing what you're tolerating, what the other person's tolerating, having a conversation and seeing where that goes next. I love that.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm curious. So we AI has been very unique. I'm a technologist. That's where I used to come from. And in the recent years, with the evolution of these LLMs, we've been encouraging our clients to embrace AI as a means of scaling. We often, of course, we encourage one-on-one conversations as is the basis for success circles, and we also encourage AI as a means to kind of leverage to get feedback, to improve, optimize. So, as leaders who are facing disruption, how can AI help surface blind spots, patterns, or tensions that
Mhm.
teams might otherwise avoid? I know sometimes it's easier on like a Zoom call because you have this like other external AI thing that might be integrated into it, that might read faces and things of that sort and notice those friction points. Um, but I'm curious about it all. Like, how are you engaging with organizations as they're embracing AI, and maybe even teams that are now faced with losing people because the organizations um, are scaling or having to downsize because of things that can be replicated with AI and
Yeah.
automations.
Okay, so a few things in response to that. So first, obviously, I'm not an AI expert here. My work is really human to human, but
Mhm.
it's interesting that you're bringing up AI because we're moving from a knowledge economy, information economy to a connection
Yes.
economy. So
Yes.
you might have heard of this company, Klarna. They're a money app. In
Yeah.
2022, they started doing exactly what you're saying, really leveraging AI. And they're over from 2022 to 2025, their revenue doubled and they halved their staff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is not atypical, and my sense is we're gonna be moving more and more in that direction. So why is that relevant? The criticality of the humans moving now and moving more and more into the future of being able to show up authentically, communicate effectively, feeling a sense of empowerment and authenticity in how they're showing up is going to become even more important as we move into the future. So that's one just contextually based on like relationships matter,
Yes.
having
Yes.
hard conversations, being real with each other, what I call conflict fluency is really going to be more and more critical in business. The other thing you're bringing up is really interesting. We have a product in development right now, which is a conflict productivity app. So
Mm,
it's powered by, it's facilitated with AI. So
mm,
in advance of the conflict, you're getting these prompts and it has historical knowledge. So it knows here's the conflicts you've had, here's how you show up, here's your patterns and tendencies, here's some things
mm,
to work on. So
mm.
you're contextualizing the upcoming conflict and then you're really clarifying just kind of like what we walk through with that peace process, but you're getting a really good understanding of where you are, what your motivators are, what success looks like from this, how you can support them, how you can do it really in partnership.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then there is a kind of a mid-mortem. So that's a pre-mortem. This is a mid, it's actually recording the conflict
Yeah.
and supporting you and facilitating to increase human agency
Yes.
and
Yeah.
have productive conflict in the
Mm.
moment. So if things get peaked, beep, beep, slow down. It seems like emotions are coming up. We're not operating in a compassionate, effective manner. Let's
Yeah.
take a breath. And then a postmortem where you're looking at here's how we thought the conflict was going to go. Here's what actually happened. Here's the key learnings and insights. You're making a lot of progress in these areas. Think about 6 months ago, you were over here. Now you're doing it so much better. So you're creating that awareness. I know this is another thing that you really want to improve. You're still need to keep working on that. Let's be curious about that. Why is this such a hard thing to overcome?
Yeah.
So, in the context of conflict and I think there's tremendous opportunities. This is still in development beta
Yeah.
phase for us, but I think that is an exciting product on the horizon that can support us in kind of hybridizing the AI world and the human world, which I believe is the most effective partnership moving
A-
forward.
Absolutely. I think it's extraordinary what's happening and scary to the same time.
That's right.
And it takes courage to have real conversations. And sometimes when people over leverage AI, they're not really tapping into how they're feeling, right? Or what's actually happening. They're over leveraging a tool without truly looking at the landscape, what's actually happening. And I imagine having a facilitator like yourself would be very useful in those situations to kind of see what's really happening. And of course, there's some tech and AI that can might help deal with those things if as people get open to trusting that tech. That's a big issue now because a lot of I'm sure team members would when they see AI, there's often a concern hearing all this disruption happening out there that they might lose out to this robot of sorts. I find it very fast. I find it very, very fascinating with what's happening. I'm excited about it personally because I came out of college at the birth of the internet,
Right.
and of course, we saw what happened then. Um, but at the same time, for organizations that have a team and that, let's say, their competitors or their partners are downsizing, this could be a very scary time.
It is a scary time, and even so you talked about accountability, these are potential future really hard conversations that a lot of people are going to need to have because this is business, this
Yeah,
is our current context, this is a technology that is touching almost every part of our life.
yeah,
So, how do we as leaders create the conditions to actually deeply care for our people? And
mhm,
if we do need to have hard conversations, let's not wait until the very end and then have that one conversation, "Hey, I'm really sorry, but we have to let you go." Let's create opportunities for our teams to step into that potential and
Yeah.
really optimize their chances of making it work, but also being really clear, this is what we need. We need you to do what you're doing, but also leverage AI in a way that maximizes your overall value contribution to the company. And we walk with them every step of the way. Either they demonstrate that value, and that's amazing. That's ideally our first choice. But otherwise, we've set really clear expectations, made sure that they have everything they need. They were committed to doing that thing. And it's a much more humane
It
way
is.
to
Yes.
let them go because we've been walking with them every step of the way.
And in some organizations, I've heard Microsoft recently creating a whole committee in the organization to help people to navigate to a different role in the organization. Because let's say the old role is now automated now. So they're giving people access to whether it's leveraging AI or finding another strength or finding something else that they're good at to work into another role in the organization where it works as a win-win situation
Yeah.
versus just, removing the person completely, which is, scary and happening quite a bit.
I think that it's a new era of change management that's
Mm,
happening and businesses are experiencing. And I think models like Microsoft, and we need to experiment and create,
yes.
stories and share those stories of how to do this evolution humanely.
Yeah. Yeah. Regarding yourself, what's a tough truth you personally had to face in order to grow as a leader over the years?
Well, my first business, I my identity was so enmeshed
Hmm.
with the business
Hmm.
that one, I felt like I had to have it all figured out.
Hmm.
I wouldn't even like beta test things because I was perfecting them in the proverbial lab before I put them out there. And
Hmm.
then when the business wasn't gaining traction and started failing, I personally felt like a failure. My identity and the identity of the business were one and the same. I did not have a growth mindset. I had a
Hmm.
knower mindset.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it was really paralyzing. So that was a huge challenge and limitation that I had, which was really painful and honestly took me years to transcend. And now, as I start new companies, I'm able to really be liberated and just, say like, I don't know if this is gonna work. Like, what's wrong with me? Like, what are you seeing that I'm not seeing? Like,
Right.
really inviting those edges,
Hmm.
beyond my world and my limitations and
Hmm.
my perspective. Um,
Yeah.
so, it's much easier to acknowledge in retrospect some of the
Yes.
blind spots and shortcomings because in the moment, we're not always aware. 97% of our motivation and uh, operation in the world is subconsciously motivated.
Yes.
So it's really hard
Yes.
to be like, well, my blind spot is this flawed belief that when, that things need to be this way or things are that way.
Yeah.
That's why we really need to pause and have that conflict, and conflict is a great opportunity to let us know that something is out of alignment in our system, and not
Yes.
just have a productive conflict, but go back to the conflict as much as none of us wanna do that, but go back to the conflict, reflect on that, and
Mm.
understand why was that
Mm.
so emotional for me?
Yeah.
Where is the belief, and is that belief really serving me? And if it's not, we need to do something about it.
And as we're having this conversation, kind of going deep about um, how we're showing up as leaders, I have to start going back and apologizing to every single male boss I've ever worked for because out of college, every job I had was very short, maybe 9 months to a year or a year and a half, and
Mm,
I found that every time I was under a boss, right, who gave me orders or requests, things of that sort, it was short lived. And then I realized that a lot of it came from my own dad
mm,
and some of the friction points we had when I was in high school, and specifically a key moment when I brought closure to that and even talked to my dad about that, all of a sudden, just like this whole thing unraveled and opened up and been able to have much more extraordinary partnerships with people, and it's fascinating how these things kind of stem from a young age. And there's so much value in uncovering these blind spots, especially as it relates to making progress, executing other things that are vital, maybe even growing a business, scaling a business, selling a business. It's very vital. You mentioned before too, and like having a business, like having one of the key things that founders need to learn sometimes is letting go. That's why, Michael Gerber, one of my mentors, talks about the idea of building a business as a franchise model, not for the sake of selling the business, but it's releasable at some point, or it builds on itself, it grows on itself, and people feel inherently, team members, an opportunity to be better leaders within it. And I'm just aware that it does take a bit of work, and it is very useful to be in a cohort, perhaps led by yourself, or in a EO cohort or YPO cohort, or even you know with the EOS system community, or even success circles, to go deeper and notice those things as an opportunity to make progress. And we all want progress, right? We all want progress. As Tony Robbins, one of my mentors, talks about, is happiness oftentimes is a factor of making measurable progress. And I really align with that.
Yeah, that's it. That's the 1% better that you talk about.
Mhm.
And one other thing, just because I think it's really appropriate to you and
Please.
to
Yeah.
your community, is in the context of delegation
Mm.
and freedom
Mm.
and living aligned with our unique genius, our purpose, our unique ability, what have you. So many of the leaders that I work with say, I know I need to delegate more. I know I'm the bottleneck.
Mm.
And they will read books like Essentialism, or,
Yeah.
How to Delegate Effectively. And even
Right.
EOS has great tools, this tool called Delegate and Elevate. And
Yeah.
we get black and white. These are the things that I need to delegate so I can live in my
Mm.
unique ability. Um,
Mm.
it's one thing to have information, but information, and even information and motivation, is not enough.
Right.
So sometimes, not always, but sometimes there's a story
Mm.
associated with that, which is tied to a belief. And that story, for example, is, if I'm not the bottleneck, then what is my value? I have a feeling of importance because
Yes.
everybody needs to come to me. They can't do it without me. If they
Yes.
could do it without me, then what value am I?
Mm.
So to really understand, so for any of your listeners who are
Mm.
struggling with, delegating and really living aligned with
Mm.
the work that you're here to do on this planet, just take some time and reflect and say, what's right with being the bottleneck? What value are you getting from it? Because there's a motivation
Yeah.
that is more compelling than really delegating. We're just not aware of it. And when I work with my clients and we unravel that, they start to realize, like,
Mm.
sometimes even beliefs that are so silly,
Mm.
like, I like working 80 hours a week because then I'm exhausted, and it's understandable that I'm exhausted and people will feel bad for me.
Exactly.
Like, that's
Yeah.
wild, but that's a
Yes.
real thing. People, like, are
Yes.
motivated to be like, "Wow, you work so hard." Oh, that's you're leaving it all on the line. You're like a
Yeah.
true entrepreneur, or whatever it is. But we need to get under the stories and the behaviors to what is the
Yes.
deeper motivation and the beliefs and the
Yeah.
identity.
Mm.
Again, looking at our parents, and, you
Yes.
have to have it all figured out, whatever it is, but that story is
Yeah.
really important.
Amazing. Once again, Tony Robbins, or I allude to him. I also lead a community in New York as relates to his work. He talks about the 6 human needs, which relates to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you could say, and how when we connect things to, like, significance, let's say, it can become a habit of sorts. I know in my business, Success Circles, for many years, we pair people together every 2 weeks. And for many years, I was involved in that process, and I would spend maybe 2 days every 2 weeks to kind of sit through, match people together, and I really enjoyed it. Kind of looking at personalities, who would be good for each other. And then at some point, um, started leveraging my team, having them do more of that. And now we're using AI to kind of match people, personalities, backgrounds, dreams, aspirations. How do we connect people together in ways where people can challenge each other, inspire each other, and become better in the process? And it took me a while to let go of that, from spending 2 days many years ago, to now spending like an hour every 2 weeks and allowing the system to do the work for us. And it's freed up so much. That's, we're looking into scaling and getting into other communities and helping more people who are doing EOS. It's very fascinating, and it's so vital that we kind of know ourselves, especially if we have a vision, if we have a why, and we know that there's something in the way of really owning that why, fueling that why each day. And EOS, by the way, is just an extraordinary framework. When I touched on this years ago with Traction, right? This book, and also with Rocket Fuel afterwards, it opened the doors to see my own bottlenecks. As an engineer, it's easy to fix everything. It doesn't work in a relationship. I was coached many years ago from people around me in a relationship. You don't want to fix your partner. But it also relates to business too. You can't fix everything. And it's just vital to be a leader. And it's vital to understand what a visionary is and how a visionary is able to chart, lead the course, right? Inspire the team, and what's possible out of that too.
That's right. Yeah.
It's great. What are, I guess, a couple of final questions, and we'll talk about your book too, which is launching too on August 4th, I believe. Um, what are some rituals or habits you embrace each day to keep yourself in check? Like keep yourself aligned, maybe morning rituals, evening rituals, just maybe a couple that stand out to keep
Yeah,
you.
sure. So
Yeah.
my morning ritual is really essential to everything that happens for the rest of the day. So
Mm,
very first thing is, well, I get up at 5:45.
mm,
Before I open my eyes, I do two things.
mm,
One, at least three gratitudes, but
mm,
just open the container for
mm,
letting whatever gratitude is presenting.
mm,
And then I do an affirmation,
mm,
um,
mm.
which was inspired by Gay Hendricks' The Big
Yeah,
Leap.
yeah.
Um, so that for me is really significant. I made it
What's
my own.
what's affirmation? I'm curious if you're open
Yeah,
to it.
sure. Yeah, of course. I expand in success,
Mm,
abundance, integrity, and love
mm.
every day as I inspire others to do the same.
Wow, got it. Yeah.
And then I
Mm,
meditate for 10
mm,
minutes. And
mm,
then I have a menu of options. So I actually
mm,
have a menu that the night before I will check off, and it's
mm.
usually sweating, so strength training or cycling.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's yoga, stretching, going for a walk in the woods, reading. But really, those four are the things that I do every morning, and then
love
I'll
it.
choose one or two cold plunge, sauna, things
Yes,
like that.
yes, yeah,
Yeah, and that's it. And then I have a couple questions that I journal on in the morning and a couple questions that I journal on in the evening, one of which
yeah.
is what are the three most important things that I do tomorrow? So I get
Mm,
my headspace in that mindset, and then
mm,
I release it so I can unplug and
mm.
go to sleep in relative peace, which is hard for
Ama
an entrepreneur.
Yes, it is. I've found in recent years for myself, some of my clients, and something I've learned more is how vital is to feel more, like to feel the why, feel the vision, to own that, and to embrace rituals that enhance that. I used to meditate where I would kind of clear my mind, and it was useful on some level of 65,000 thoughts going through the head each day.
Right?
And at some point, I learned to kind of dance with those thoughts and found a different way of priming my mind
Yeah.
by feeling more, right? Whether it's gratitude or feeling who I'm about to impact, I love my clients more. And that has been extraordinary in my own process in recent years, just really feeling more. And it's also allowed me to personally look into the things I'm tolerating, right? Because I'm feeling those things I'm tolerating, I'm not versus going numb to the world. So easy to go numb to the world, especially in this age of AI and noise.
Yeah.
Um, it's very fascinating. It's really, really fascinating. I very much have a growth mindset, and I really challenge people to start embracing that mindset, especially if they're looking to leave a legacy and impact people and build an organization where the members of the organization are also inspired to do great things too as well.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. The feeling is what creates the vitality and helps us orient in the world, right?
Yeah.
Oh, this feels really meaningful. This feels off. This I'm so grateful for. When we can get that energetic out into
Mm.
the quantum field,
Mm.
just start things start like it feels cosmic and magical, and probably right now it is, but I know in my heart there is a science behind it, which
Yes,
we
there is.
will figure out one day. But
Yes.
I love that. Like it, let's not think about it. Let's feel it in our heart and bones and
Yeah.
cells.
And
Totally.
allow your dreams to work for you when you're sleeping. If
That's
you're
right.
in that place of navigating through friction points and things are tolerating, if you're in a state of bliss, flow, gratitude, those dreams are working for us tonight. And then we wake up and we're even more fueled to kind of own that why as we're going through our day because we're harnessing our mind's ability, our body's ability throughout the day. It's really great.
Exactly. One of the questions in the reflection questions in the evening is, what do you want your subconscious to work on tonight?
Mm. Mm. A lot of really great nuggets here. So my team's gonna pull all this out, kind of summarize it. It's like nugget after nugget, things you're providing here. And I really believe it is very vital because a lot of entrepreneurs don't do this. You know, they're just going through what they're used to doing, kind of building based on maybe some books that are out there without actually doing the inner work.
Yeah.
So it's really, really vital how you're bringing this forward, especially around conflict resolution. So your book is out. Your book is called Inviting Genius, right? It's called invitinggenius.com. Talk about the book, and I know you talked about some of the elements here already around conflict resolution. Is there anything else you want to cover or talk about as you're in process to launch this extraordinary book?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, the book is one part memoir, so I share a lot of stories from myself, from my clients,
Mm.
going through adversity and doing it effectively or ineffectively, and then learning how to do it effectively. So one part memoir, one part manifesto, which is
Mm.
really like, imagine what our companies could be, imagine what our world could be when we can have productive conflict, when we can live and show up
Yeah.
authentically to who we genuinely are, and how much more value we would add to the world and to our lives in that. And one part manual. This is
Mm.
how you do it.
Mm.
These are the steps. So there's tools, frameworks, methodologies for any of us, whether you're a leader in an organization, a founder, a parent,
Mm.
a friend. It's applicable across the board. But the focus is for leaders. The subtitle is
Of
How
course.
Good Leaders Use Conflict to Become Great.
Yes.
And yeah, I would just say like I see, so we didn't even get to the EOS chapter, but the EOS chapter was really in working with teams. I see so many times where the teams are not saying what needs to be said.
Mm.
They're having it inside conversations. They're saying a part of it, and it has so many consequences: lost revenue,
Yes.
lack of alignment, increased
Mm.
friction.
Mm.
We lose good talent, and it adds up. It adds up psychologically, it adds up culturally, it adds up financially. So anyone who is really looking to understand, well, how do we do this?
Mm.
How do we have conversations that matter, relationships that are really deep? How do we move from a group of leaders to a leadership team?
Mm.
This book shows you how.
I can't wait. Really can't. Awesome. You're covering a lot of things that I'm very passionate about, and our clients will get a lot of value. We're going to recommend your book highly to our members.
Thank you.
This has been a privilege, Matthew. Truly a privilege to engage in this conversation, this podcast interview. For our audience out there, tap into this episode at rulesforsuccess.com. We have it on Spotify, we have it on YouTube, we have it on um, Amazon. It's all over the place. Rulesforsuccess.com. We'll pull out some of the nuggets out of this podcast and they'll go on to momentumtips.com, kind of mini podcast, 2-minute nuggets that Matthew has shared. And there are a lot. So we're going to delve into that. My team will delve into it and pull that together. Congratulations on the book launch. For our audience to check out invitinggenius.com. August 4th is the date. Thank you, Matthew Abrams. This has been fantastic.
Thank you, Joseph. So fun.